You are now tuned into the Wake the Flock Up Network.
Welcome back to the show. You are now listening to Wake the Flock Up with Concept 714, and with me is my beautiful co-host
Rainbow Zoo. What's up, guys?
Rainbow Zoo, and we're sitting here at our home, King's Corner, Kingz Graphic Designs, and we got a packed house for our very special guest today. But before I introduce him, I want to thank every single one of you guys that is here. Because every single one of you guys, literally, that is in this building, you guys helped me get where I am today and the show to where it is and where it'll go. So thank you guys, all the artists, all the fans, everyone that's listening. I couldn't have done it without you. So again, thank you very much. We're sitting here with the writer of Straight Outta Compton, co-writer, right? Two writers to that.
I guess you'd say original writer.
Original writer.
Yeah, I conceived the project, so
Nice.
that's it.
As I'm going through all the research that I'm doing to make sure that I'm prepped for today, I notice a pattern, and I want to know where that pattern emerged. Why? It seems to me you have a fascination or a very strong interest in hip-hop culture, or at least in urban culture. Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, I'll qualify that. In 1986, I started a home entertainment label, and we started releasing independent black audience content in the home entertainment market. And at that time, nobody here in the audience probably was even alive during that time, you know, you had this content that had come from the 70s, the so-called blaxploitation era. So you had the Jamafanaka and Melvin Van Peebles and Rudy Ray Moore and Dolomite and all that stuff. So if you're going to start a black content label in 86, you really had to go back to the, content from the 70s. And I think Eddie Murphy was, had become a star with Beverly Hills Cop, but Denzel was just kind of starting with Glory, and Wesley Snipes hadn't happened yet, and of course Will Smith, had 10 years. I think forget when Fresh Prince came out, but so I've got this fledgling, black home entertainment label, and I picked that area because it was the opportunity. It was the thing that was missing, and nobody was going out, and a lot of this content was black owned, and you could go in and acquire it. And we did individual deals with a lot of these guys. It was content not controlled by the major studios. Anyway, long story. I won't get into that too much, but it was the hip hop music movement that changed the game for opportunities for black entertainers. And I saw it directly because I was selling black content. So when NWA hit, you're like, God, this is... And then you start seeing the perception of people at what was then mostly bricks and mortar retail, the perception of black content changing, where you had this bias. I mean, you had all kinds of bias about black content because there just wasn't, A, there wasn't a lot of it. B, there was this, all this misguided kind of racist stuff that was going on at that era. So my movement and my getting to know the hip-hop area really was based out of a certain business necessity. I had to come and I had to understand it because it was affecting the area that I was in.
But why get in that business to begin with?
Well, as I say, it's where the opportunity was.
Right.
There was a lane that hadn't been established.
If you're a guy
right?
starting a company with 17 grand, it's not like you're going to go and get into business with the studios right away.
I understand that, but why follow that? Why start that company to begin with? Was there, did you see that was just the way you were going to choose to express yourself?
I was a producer that got screwed in a distribution deal. And so I was a guy that had one title that I produced. It was Jay Leno's first live concert tape done in 1984. And a bunch of deals got blocked. And I said, well, I'm going to have to sell it myself. So I became a distributor to sell the one title that I had. And that forced me to sort of examine the whole home entertainment business. And I became a wholesaler. I mean, not unlike the way, Ruthless Records started with, Lonzo Williams, initially doing these mixtapes that he was wholesaling at the swap meets before he, put together World Class Wrecking Crew. Wholesale distribution a lot of times seeds proprietary content. So that's the way I got in, and I started wholesaling all these old movies from the 70s, the blaxploitation movies, and that was the easiest thing to sell of all the things that I was going and accessing at the time. And so that moved into a licensing initiative to go and get the things that hadn't been out before. So it may seem strange, but it seemed very logical to me at the time because, what were the other opportunities? Right. The other big one was Latin Hispanic. And, I later got into that because I got into business with Televisa in Mexico, doing their home entertainment, putting telenovelas out and in the marketplace. But the ethnic, it appeared to me at that place with somebody starting with very little money that the ethnic niches were a good place to try to, get a level of expertise. And that meant all this sort of, segmented marketing because you had to find, you had to go and find the zip codes where the customers were. You had to find the stores where the customers were going into. And that's really what seeded Xenon Pictures.
Did you find that at some point, once you put out the product, that because of the culture that it was based on or for, that it just eventually starts selling itself? Or did you have the same difficulty selling the other products?
No, you had to have product that people wanted. And Rudy Ray Moore was a cult figure. We put out, we sold like 1 million units of Dolomite.
Wow.
It was crazy. That was a movie made for $90,000 that played in a few theaters. And Rudy's, his fan base was deep. Same with Jamal Fanaka, and the Penitentiary films. And, of course, Melvin Van Peebles and Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. I got into business with all these guys. That's the stuff sold because it was known. We would do what we needed to do to place it and market it, but the building a distribution company is really incredibly labor intensive.
Yes.
You've got to set up at the time with distributors all around the country. You got to go in and these distributors really care about the major studio releases. And so if you're an independent, you're in there huffing and puffing and pushing your stuff, and you're up against $100 million a Star Wars like movie. They're going to look at you like, where the hell did this guy come from? But we believed in these niches. We absolutely did, and this is what would lead me to do the Welcome to Death Row documentary.
So while you were going for a niche that was both logical and therefore lucrative, what kind of creative seeds were you sowing? Like, what was in development that was something that you could truly call yours? I understand the logic and the importance of setting up your investments, especially after having some failed business attempts to start something with growing. But what were you what's the word? What was incubating at the time creatively?
Well, I mean, you're looking at it and you're going, what's missing? Well, everything. So the first thing I did was produce a definitive documentary on Martin Luther King, which got an approval from the King Foundation. So we started producing content. That was our first doc. Second doc, Mahalia Jackson, considered the world's greatest gospel singer. Nothing, believe it or not, it's hard to believe, but in 92, there had never been a definitive cradle-to-grave documentary on Martin Luther King. Pretty crazy.
That is hard to believe.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there had been other things, and part of it was the King Foundation being kind of famously, in that context, they were, Phil Jones, who was the lawyer for the King Foundation, he was suing CBS for using the speeches, and they said those speeches are copyrighted, and the networks were saying they're in the public domain. So there was all this, antagonism between many of the broadcast companies and the King Foundation. And in the face of this, we just, I did a doc on Spec, and they found out about it, and they came in guns a-blazing, and I said, what do you need? And we worked out a deal on the phone, and it became the first authorized doc on Martin Luther King. Mahalia Jackson followed that. We did a documentary on Rudy Ray Moore because we were in business with him. So we'd done 3 docs before we did Death Row, which was a much more ambitious project.
What led you to that? What led you specifically to Death Row? I mean, not only does the Death Row story paint, you couldn't make a better movie if you wrote it. Like that whole, from beginning to end, right? And only knowing it from the aspect of a hip hop insider, right? Not knowing the true inner details that you later got to learn. What initially said, this is a story. There's something here.
Because it's this great made in America story. I mean, this is about America. This is about making it in America. And, in this case, it's about, highly talented African Americans, looking to get their place at the table, and what happens and how it happens, and beginning with Ruthless and Easy, and how all that. It's look at Ruthless Records. Look at what Easy achieved. From zero, from a cold start, JJ Fad, gold. Easy Does It, platinum. On the heels of that, right next to that, Straight Outta Compton. Then No One Can Do It Better by the DOC. This doesn't happen in the music business. You don't get that bang, 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 bang level of success from nothing. So, I mean, this is what Suge Knight sees. And he sees that Dre is doing all the production on all these records. And he's a bodyguard for the DOC. The DOC would say, no, I was just hanging out with him. But really, Suge's kind of MO at that time was, I'll hang around, and if there's a problem, I'll diffuse it and then give me a few $100, which was, I don't think he was formally, on contract with anybody, but that was kind of how he worked at the time. But he also saw that there were issues between the talent and Easy and Jerry. And, this Ruthless starts as this thing in the neighborhood where Easy is like, last night I had dinner with Arabian Prince, who was one of the original, he's on the cover of the Straight Outta Compton album, and kind of, ended up, everybody says dropped out of the picture, but actually he was on the whole tour with NWA, and he was the first guy to leave the label. He produced all the J.J. Fad albums. So he was the first guy in line to get money, and he got paid. He was the first guy that went to Heller and said, I want my money. But he also said, if it's going to be this rough trying to collect my money, I'm out. But he was there through this. Well, this is an aside, but he's, NWA is going to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame now. So, there's an issue about Arabian Prince, being honored as part of that group. But the point is that starts as we're all buddies, we're all friends, we're all guys from the neighborhood,
Right.
and we're trying. Let's put together a record. Let's do all this, and then it becomes very, very successful. And then Easy knows that he knows what he can do and he knows what he can't do, and he brings in he sidles up to Heller, and Heller sets up. He puts the first album through Atlantic Atco, and then the next two through Priority Records, and then the fourth through the DOC album through Atlantic. Sets up the publishing, helps set does the things that Easy doesn't know how to do, and Easy and becomes a guy at 20. He says, I'm a manager. Realizes Easy wants to own the company and that this needs to be a black-owned company, and says, I'm a manager. I take 20% off the top. Now, that sounds good to Easy at the time. They were so successful, and the artists see so much money going to Heller that they rebel. But that was the deal. I mean, fair is fair. That was the deal that Easy agreed to.
Right. So it wasn't anything that he wasn't entitled to or it was agreed upon, but whatever they were giving him. It just seemed
unfair to everybody else who's looking at this and going, Dre, for example, doing all the production work, or a lot of the production work on the albums. And, Cube, when he left, it had been paid $32,000.
Yes.
He said, how the hell am I going to make it? But he wasn't willing to. They're very impatient guys, too. They weren't willing to wait out the timetable in the record industry. There is a lag. You ship, there are royalty accounting periods. And, believe me, I've been in the home entertainment business for 3 decades. I know how long it takes for the Walmarts of the world to pay. And to get the money out of the accounts and things. I don't know the particulars because I wasn't there, but I do know that if I was in Jerry's shoes, I probably would have advanced more money to those guys, given the success that
right.
But he just But you ask yourself, okay, would Geffen have done that? Maybe would Tommy Mottola have done that? You look at any other mogul, and this goes on in the music business all the time. At what point the advancement of money is often the determinant between somebody staying and going when they're waiting on full accounting.
As the story goes on and you're doing the research for Welcome to Death Row, right? What was there a surprise twist that you did not expect to run into, or did it pretty much lay out as in like, well, that's about right when you're dealing with this type of environment?
We had no idea how dangerous it was. That's what we had no idea that we were going to be, I was going to be fearing for my life, every day for 3 years. I don't, there's a point, and I say this in the book, you're so sick of the threats that you're like, man, just bring it the fuck on. You kind of go irrational because you're so, it's the psychic thing of feeling like someone's going to hurt you is almost more terrifying than being hurt yourself,
We're all pretty well aware of the controversy that's surrounding the portrayal of the manager in Straight Outta Compton. Do you feel like his points are valid? I don't know. I definitely felt like he was demonized in the movie a little bit, but I'm not completely familiar with the history. You seem to be very well versed in it.
Let me just say this, okay? I spent a lot of time with Heller, and I'm the only writer that spent a significant amount of time with him, and Alan Winkus, who I pulled into the project. So we, Heller generously allocated a lot of time to us. He's not happy now, and he's making some allegations that, in the suit, which I'm named in, aren't correct. But our original screenplay was about the relationship between Jerry and Easy. And I looked at it as the road I was going down. And again, this is before, remember, it's show business, it's Hollywood, things change. And I'm the original guy. But the most compelling story to me was to take Heller, who had been a iconic guy, a guy that brought Elton John and to America, did tours with Pink Floyd. I mean, he was just, at 35, he's driving a Rolls Royce, and he's the cock of the walk, and he's managing people like John Fogerty, and he had a big career interfacing with David Geffen and people like that. And at some point, he just sort of lost his way. And I liken him, when we were writing it, I likened him to the Paul Newman character in The Verdict, if you've ever seen that movie, which was, this, the first time you see Newman in that movie, I mean, he's at such a low point as a lawyer that he's like shaking down people at a funeral to try to get, and that Heller was crashed on his parents' couch and, trying to find his way in the business because he'd lost his intent. He'd gone through a bad divorce. He'd had issues with alcohol. And so I saw it as this sort of great story about two people that need one another. Easy, who's this, and who come together and build something, and then what happens. So that's the road I went down. There was always the issue of Cube's anger towards Heller. There was always the issue of, Suge Knight coming to his office, grabbing the contracts. There was always the, Solar Studios. There was always the issues surrounding the eventual destruction of Ruthless that was rooted in people's anger towards Heller, which I felt, and again, I wasn't there, but it starts as this thing of we're all buddies, and Easy's making these pronouncements, and at some point it's Easy, who's also a ruthless Machiavellian character, to a degree, saying that Jerry's the play more than his buddies, and Cube didn't want to see that, and Dre didn't want to see that, but basically it was Easy driving the bus, and Jerry, taking a lot of the
Black.
some of it, yeah, and not to say that Heller was a particularly nice guy, because he may not have been. He's got an edge to him when I interviewed him, but he was critical to the success of this whole thing. He put his own money in, on the tour. I can't say too much because I'm being.
Of course.
I'm
I'm
named in a $110 million lawsuit right now against the production. But the, it's my process was to paint him, portray him somewhat more sympathetically than he was put in the film. But look, it's not my show. You go in and you're the original writer. You go in, and also remember, I'm writing for Tamika Wright, because this thing is Jerry. At one point, when he stopped talking to me, he goes, "This is never going to get fucking made, is it?" And I said, I just said, I don't know at that point, but. What I did know is that we had to write a screenplay that portrayed Eazy-E a certain way and gave him his props and made him the lead character. And because we were going to have to get the music rights from his widow, Tamika. So the big, it felt like winning the Super Bowl when she read the draft and said and she called me at, it's the craziest thing. She called me and I didn't recognize the number. I picked up the number and she goes, this is Tamika, right? I don't know who you are, but you captured easy. So this must be God's will.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
That is a fucking moment. I need
to ask something because having grown up knowing nothing but hip hop and kind of just that was the guidance path for a lot of us here growing up. If you paid attention enough during those days of MTV when everything was, they didn't know what was going to affect them in the future, and they didn't have like the publicists weren't as strong. Like I believe like MTV News played a crucial part in like really displaying the way hip hop artists acted and interacted with each other and with their audience. Dre was displayed in this movie in a way that, as someone who has an idea of and was present during those times, that was not really the way it went down. And like if you gather the points together, you could say this is not really. You've seen Dre from interviews and stuff like that. I almost factual that did not happen. Like Dre was really painted in this superhero type way.
I felt like he was romanticized too.
Like strongly. And I'm sure Dre being Dre now, he was present there every day. And he had he wanted to make sure the story was told in his favor because he's vastly the most successful, at least industry wise, out of everyone present. Was that something you kept in mind? Was that something that...
I always say, you don't write fuck the police and be the patron saint of goodness.
Right.
I mean, it just... These guys were... there were definitely issues in the hood there, and whether they were gangsters themselves, they always say, well, they weren't gangsters. Well, they knew gangsters. They had relatives that were gangsters. Easy was a drug dealer. I mean, Arabian said last night, Easy was fearless. Easy was, that guy was crazy. He would do anything. He's just sometimes, the scariest guys in South Central, these guys that are like 5'3", 5'4", they have the barrel chest in there, and, people, I think, underestimate them.
Yeah.
I mean, like Rick James, who I know was Tupac's best friend at the end of his life. I mean, this guy, Suge Knight sometimes, he would always be around Suge Knight. Suge Knight would sometimes stand behind this guy, and he's like 5'5". But, yeah, I mean, you're not going to grow up in that environment and, not have issues. I mean, look, Dre had how many kids by the time he was 19? Quite a few. And I mean, he was, it's not the obligation of the movie studio to engage in exactitude when it comes to factual stuff.
That's an issue. That's an issue with me.
Pick any movie, Beautiful Mind or whatever. Their job, if they're going to put up that kind of money, they're going to do what is going to inspire the audience to love the movie. And if you don't like these guys, if you don't love these guys, a lot of what works in that movie doesn't work. So
that I understand. You have to sell tickets. I get that. Yeah. But here's the issue that I have, and I think a lot of people also have. This movie is a representative of a culture and like the initiatives and a very strong, powerful force that propelled the culture to what it is now. So if I'm going in and I see it's the NWA, it's depicting, this generation that grew up ahead of me has no idea of all the past stuff that happened. So this is going to be their perception of reality come towards thinking of Dre or Ice Cube. All they know them from is like Ride Along 2 and the guy that makes headphones. So us that grew up listening to them, us that grew up with that standard, with that, hey, I walked in as someone who was embedded in hip hop saying, I'm going to definitely fact check this in my head. So as I'm sitting down, I'm like, no, No. And I think, yes, you have to sell seats, but if you're going to portray it as this is their story, don't you kind of have to stick closer to the source material?
I think it depends on who you are. I mean, as I say, my original draft tethered pretty damn close to the truth.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're asking Hollywood to make a movie about people that are paying Hollywood to make a movie about them. What do you think is going to be emphasized?
Yeah, I mean, when you've got a unique scenario, because you've got two of the characters in the film that are producers on the film. So it's like.
But Welcome to Death Row was not that, and I kind of want to talk about that a little bit more than the NWA movie, if I may. I having gone.
No problem there. That doc is the basis of what I'm working on the movie right now.
What are we going to get from the movie that we didn't get in the book?
I don't know. It's still writing itself, but I think and it's still unfolding. The story is still unfolding. Mm-hmm. The key character a key character, I would say the titular character in the Death Row story is this imprisoned former drug dealer, Mike Harris.
Harris built an organization that distributed cocaine in California, Arizona, Texas, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, Louisiana, Florida, and New York. Investigators say he dealt so much cocaine, major Colombian drug kingpins like Mario Villabona were obliged to deal directly with Harris. But like a mob godfather, Harris sought to legitimize his illicit fortune and gain Beverly Hills respectability.
I was not a drug dealer. I was a person who decided to sell drugs. But I also, at another point, decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. So I took those proceeds and invested in various real estate and businesses that turned out to be quite profitable.
Mike Harris had a wonderful background in entertainment. I think he was the first African-American ever to produce a Broadway show that was a smash, and it gave Denzel Washington his start.
Checkmate was the name of the play. The play opened on Broadway. Many of us African Americans have been on Broadway, on the screen, out front singing and dancing, but very few of us have been there as producers.
He's the most interesting guy in the whole equation because he'd built he was a guy that was known to be this notorious so-called drug kingpin, but he was actually a guy going in and out of the drug business and seeding legitimate businesses in South Central Los Angeles and employing a lot of black people. He gets nailed on what would become a trumped-up charge, an attempted murder charge, which has been discredited, but he served 25 years for that, and a federal drug charge, where he made the fateful choice of going in one last time on a deal, and the feds got him. But he put $1.5 million into Death Row Records when, basically Suge Knight was there with Dre trying to hold all those artists, and he needed that money more than life itself to make the label work. And Mike Harris is the guy that was handling his appeal on the attempted murder charge, David Kenner, was introduced to Suge, became Suge Knight's right-hand man and the president of Death Row Records, and would eventually betray Mike Harris. So, I mean, it's this amazing Shakespearean story, and it goes very deep, and it's actually more of a more interesting story than the Straight Outta Compton story.
Will this also be a motion picture, or will you go documentary?
No, it's
stuff.
Well, I'm doing a doc. I'm doing a doc right now, but it's basically to set up the feature film. So, but what Straight Outta Compton, and it's a great movie. I like the movie a lot. I did like you. When I see Jerry Heller chasing Eazy-E down the hallway in Macola, I'm like, didn't fucking happen. But it's
No,
I mean, Eazy hounded Lonzo Williams, hounded him to get an introduction to Jerry Heller, who had set up and established a business at Macola Records. So I mean, that's some of those things I had more trouble with that than
the one thing I got super excited about, and I hope Hollywood does it justice, right? Is I guess hip hop's Elvis, right? So when we're talking about Tupac, right? And how are you approaching that? Do you have an idea? Is that going to be just kind of engulfed in the story, or
Tupac is a player in the story, but he's a supporting character in the story. Somebody's going to make the Tupac movie. I think it's Morgan Creek is in the middle of all that right now, the studio, and it's John Singleton, I think, is attached to that.
Nice.
But I'm more interested in the whole Shakespearean thing that happened between Kenner, Mike Harris, and Suge Knight. I mean, Suge Knight decides to fuck Mike Harris? Wow. That's like the last guy on earth.
Is this a grandiose choice by Suge, or was it you see like a necessity?
No, I think it's just the nature of the beast.
Okay.
It's just the nature of the beast with Mike Harris. I go see him regularly at the federal prison in Lompoc, and because he's monitoring what I'm writing right now.
Nice.
That must be awesome for you.
No. It's we've had a long relationship. We didn't speak for 14 years, and now we're back talking again.
Right.
And since Compton came out, and really since I started writing the book, which is good. But
we're leading down to Welcome to Death Row. So as you're collecting this information and you're gathering, and like you said, it's writing itself, right? Is it playing the same way kind of that Straight Outta Compton is playing? Like, is this information easy to gather? Is it, this is an obvious step taken? Are there a lot of twists and turns in this particular series of events that led to Death Row and the extension of it?
I don't know. The interesting thing about this story is that, it's largely trapped in the minds of a lot of people. So a lot of people have one little piece of information that they can add to the story. Well, I was there and I saw this kind of thing. So this is what happened when I was writing the Straight Outta Compton strip. The more I talk to people, the more things unfold, and the more you hear, and then suddenly you add that into, then it becomes draft 15, and then it becomes draft 18, and then it becomes 21, which is what we wrote 21 drafts. So I'm seeing as I get further into the Death Row project that there are going to be things that are not in the book that I'm going to be hearing for the first time that I know I've got to put in. But it's more of like this is really about the depths of human greed. It really, I don't know if you ever watch American Greed, that show on CNBC.
Mm-hmm.
This is like an epic American greed story, because I mean, how do you take money from a guy, when you are absolutely going to go down the drink and cut a deal with Interscope and then try to move the guy? I mean, it's just, and then your lawyer, the guy that's handling. You're the lawyer and the president of Death Row Records, and you're handling the appeal of Michael Harris, and you're gonna try to sell him down the river. It's just crazy what happens. But I mean, it's amazing what happens in the face of epic success. And this was epic success. They're doing $150 million a year at retail. It's crazy. And in this little office, they've got Crips and Bloods in the office. Suge Knight is, it's a very, very unconventional company.
What is the bridge between the two? You think the stronger bridge is it Suge Knight? Besides the obvious, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What's the bridge that guides you from straight Outta Compton to Welcome to Death Row and back and forth?
I mean, Suge Knight is a bodyguard who sizes up what happened at Ruthless and decides to take it for himself and realizes that, Dre is the goose that laid the golden egg. And it becomes this sort of by any means necessary way of, starting a label. He has a mentor of sorts in Dick Griffey at Solar Studios, who executes a couple of publishing deals through Sony that get Dre some money, that get Suge some money. The first publishing deal was for Mario Johnson, Chocolate, from On the Back of Ice Ice Baby. I mean, that got Suge kind of a little bit of money to get going. But he's the essential guy is somebody that just, utilizes people, and then when he doesn't need them anymore, moves on. And he, I mean, to say that you don't need Dr. Dre anymore, that's pretty fucking crazy,
right.
So you did talk about the recurrent theme that you're finding as this story is writing itself about pretty much the greed that befalls this empire that's being built. What are some other themes that you're seeking to, expose some symptoms of the downfall of this grand, spectacle, death row that you're
Well, I think so. People looked at Suge Knight, and he was perceived as this hero. Is like, wow, man, this guy's done it. He did it. And then to have this epic fall, I think you have to examine really what are the chess moves and what are the character issues that sort of lead to these bad decisions that you make. He had two female artists, Jewel and Lady of Rage, and they were incredibly talented, and he just let them flap in the wind. He could have probably, Death Row was so hot they could have shipped probably 1 million units on either one of them, but he had a, as Simone Green, who was the house photographer, said, he had these issues with women. Just had issues with women artists. But he tried to foster this idea of we're a family, and a lot of the artists remember him, giving advances and giving money, but it became more than he changed completely.
Did this so-called family, was it really more of like a patriarchy? Is that what you mean by the issues with women?
Yeah, with him as the somewhat benevolent dictator, I guess.
What was the extent of that?
It's very complex. This is a complex thing because it's sort of like carrot and the stick. I'm going to give you this, but I might be beating the shit out of you next week.
I don't see it go any other way. But to what extent did it go? Have you developed? Is there any theories or anything like that you've started to begin to uncover about the involvement in some of the deaths that he might have had of the artists themselves? I think that's really what's going to come out is people are going to want to see this to see if it's true that he had this person killed or he's responsible for that. Have you start to unravel anything like that at all? Is that just fiction that we're in?
Look, did anybody see Murder Rap on the Reels channel? Would have a hard time finding fault with that documentary. So that puts, that puts Suge at the in the Biggie mix.
But they, they, like I said, had a false sense of security. And so as they're leaving, the party gets shut down because it's so crowded. The fire marshal shuts the place down. Packed. There's tons of people everywhere. Streets are crowded. And as they're leaving in their caravan, Puffy pulls out first in a SUV. Biggie's behind him in another SUV. He's sitting in the front passenger seat. And as they're going towards the intersection away from the museum, there's a SS Impala along the curb that pulls up alongside Biggie's car. A lone driver leans out the window and starts to shoot and, obviously kills Biggie. But that was it. And then finally, after conducting our investigation, we were able to find a co-conspirator in the murder. She was a female confidant and baby mother to one of Suge's kids. And she confesses about her involvement in the murder. She implicates Suge. She says that she met with Suge several times at the county jail where Suge was incarcerated. And Suge gives her the, basic orders or directions. Get a hold of one of my guys, a guy named Poochie, who's a known shooter and a known, kind of hitman for Suge. He's done stuff for him in the past. Mm-hmm. And says, get a hold of him and, set it up.
So you say that Suge Knight was involved with the murder of the notorious B.I.G.?
Yeah, he was behind it. He was the primary conspirator. And, of course, the trigger man is really the main suspect, but, of course, Suge set everything in motion.
But I'm less interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in the betrayal. And because people wanted this thing badly, to succeed. And I think the most important thing that you derive out of it is why it didn't. That it is an extraordinary situation to be in the middle of that level of success. And why do some people squander that success? I think that's a more interesting story, really, than, we'll always speculate on who shot. I believe it was Orlando Anderson that killed Tupac. I'm almost certain of it.
What backs that up? The theories have come about, and then the way it was handled by LAPD and all this other stuff that went down.
I don't think Keefe D is lying in murder rap. I don't think he's lying. They had him dead to rights. They were going to put him away for 26 years, and they said, "This is what we want. If you find out you lied once in this deposition, we're going to send you away forever." So he had, ample incentive to tell the truth.
Well, another irony in Suge's statement is that he's dissing Rick Ross at the time, and one of the things he says is, Rick Ross, if you want to be with Puffy, who's the guy who killed Tupac, then go ahead. So Suge talks out of both sides of his mouth, but it's interesting that he alludes to the fact that Puffy hired somebody to kill Tupac, which is what we discovered in the investigation. We have a confessing co-conspirator in that murder also, a guy named Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, who is the uncle of Orlando Anderson. Orlando Anderson, if you recall, is the one that was fighting with Tupac prior to his murder.
Right.
Okay. Well, he confesses that they did, in fact, do that murder, but it was solicited by Combs. Combs needed to get Suge and Tupac out of the way because of all these brewing animosities and hostilities going on behind their two record labels.
That's a little harder to swallow.
It really is, unless you understand the background of what was taking place with these guys. Suge Knight was hunting Puffy down. Suge Knight had essentially kidnapped a guy and tortured him, trying to find the whereabouts of Puffy Combs when he comes out to the West Coast, and trying to find the family house. And inevitably, Puffy found out that Suge was trying to hunt him down. There had already been several shootings between these crews, and when you start to put all that into perspective, it was almost like Puffy realized that it was me or him. And that is why he hired these Crips to act as his quasi-security when he came to Los Angeles. He put these people in that position specifically to protect himself from Suge.
Kill or be killed.
Exactly. It really was. It was a desperate act, but he didn't feel like he had a choice.
So why isn't Diddy in jail?
Well, we run into the same problem with the district attorney out in Las Vegas. Are you really going to try to pose a case against a music icon with hundreds of millions of dollars based on the testimony of a gang member?
I hear you. He shot up in the middle of a club and walked away. So,
yeah.
With J-Lo. How do you miss J-Lo and a pistol? I'm sorry. I'm just saying.
It's logical. It squares. The white Cadillac, the whole shot. Whether Puffy was involved, like they say, to the extent, who knows? But the simple act of retribution, and then the stories of Orlando Anderson bragging about it, and for months after that, and it was a white Cadillac. They were in the white Cadillac.
Yes.
It's just, was there another white Cadillac, with somebody that had an axe to grind?
Not that you know.
Yeah. And I think they've almost pretty much buttoned up that story. I'm more interested in the, why things happen the way they do, in success and failure, which is what people are, I think, really happen, are the.
But there's going to be a generation that's looking for those answers to come to a finalization, I think. And as important as the human interest story is in it, there's very factual things that these people are no longer alive. So it has become a mystery. It's become a folktale on the development of that. And when you say "Welcome to Death Row," they're gonna expect at least a breeze of, then this is what happened to Tupac. And now let's move on, continue. That's fun artistically, but
George, the story is so big.
Yes,
there's so many pieces of the puzzle. There's so many, and I ran into this trying to make a 90-minute movie about Ruthless Records and Eazy-E, is that there's some stuff you just can't deal with unless you want a 4-hour movie. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants a 4-hour movie. You might think you do, but what you want is a super tight movie with great characters and great character development that just puts you on a rocket ship ride and just leaves you breathless at the end of 90 plus minutes. That's the reality. So you have to cut and paste. You have to sit there and look at it, and that's part of the job. Is what's the thing that's really going to, compel the audience. So the other thing is, like you are, and you say, this hardcore hip hop guy, I want your ticket, but I also want the people that. The parents of the 18-year-old kid that's trying to figure out what this was all about, that isn't so steeped in all of this stuff, that doesn't come to the movie with a sort of level of expectation that somebody that's really been, examining this for so long and lived it and breathed it for so long. That was the great thing about Compton, is that it brought in, you've got in white suburbia, in these middle-class white bedroom communities in the suburbs, you had packed houses, watching this movie. Those people probably didn't know Jay-Z from whomever. They didn't come with that sort of background. And for a movie to go wide, you really have to get that. You have to get a lot of people that are. When we were doing the Death Row documentary, I want people to watch this that know nothing about the hip hop movement, because this is about America, and it's about making it in America, and it's about this transition of underserved, economically disadvantaged blacks looking to take a seat at the economic table, and what happens.
So if you could compare like the rise and fall of this particular, musical hip hop empire to something else, to another historical moment or a similar structure, what would you use, or what are you drawing from
You have to go to
create
Shakespeare.
that drama?
You got to go to Shakespeare.
So which Shakespearean drama?
I liken Suge Knight to Iago.
Okay.
From Othello.
Okay. So
Yeah.
envy.
Yeah.
And greed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at some level, Suge Knight understood that he was in over his head. And I think when you're in over your head, that he truly got lucky, but he didn't want to tell anybody that he got lucky. And the fact is that he got lucky is when he tried to start the label up when he got back out of prison. It was a confluence of factors. And I think sometimes when you're over your head, but you're trying to act but you're the boss, you can become a prick. You can become a real prick.
Yeah.
So what's your comment on America using this film as the vehicle?
At some level, figuratively, you look at death row and all the violence and all that figuratively. I don't think that there's a whole lot difference. I mean, whether you use your fists or whether you use lawyers or whatever, I think that there's this element of society that succeeds because of a level of ruthlessness, and that they, Donald Trump, Exhibit A, that it's a certain people are wired to do whatever is necessary. It gets more attention, I think, if you're using your fists or bats and pipes. But most people, a lot of the very successful people in business are just every bit as ruthless as the people you see in the death row story. So it's a decision that people make, I think sometimes to put the, personal success and personal aggregation of capital ahead of, maybe what's right or correct or, appropriate for the situation.
When you had the product in your hand for Compton and you finished it, it was complete. When you went around and you were hoping to have it picked up by a studio, right? I'm guessing that was the end goal for it when you initially started writing it?
Yeah, we were several drafts in, and an agent called me and wanted to do the death row story, and I said, no, it's too hard right now at this point. I'm working on Straight Outta Compton, and he put us in touch with a company that manages a lot of writers. They didn't take me on as a client because they wanted to be producers on the film. So a company called Circle of Confusion. And so what happened is that there was a guy there that knew somebody at New Line and sort of whispered down the lane, hey, we're working on this. And the guy said, yeah, keep going. So we knew what we had to do to get it to, we were going to send it out on auction, but we also knew that New Line wouldn't touch it unless we had Tamika, some sort of agreement between my company, Xenon, and Tamika for the, to put the rights. That didn't mean that she sold us the rights. It meant that she endorsed the script, and it was incumbent upon the studio to work out a separate deal with her, and she drove a pretty hard bargain, apparently. So that was really the process. It was someone at Circle of Confusion that, that got it to, that whispered to somebody. But so when it went out on auction, they waited at the end of the day, and New Line came in with an offer at the very end of the day, take it or leave it. But it had only been out 24 hours.
So it wasn't a huge struggle to reach its endpoint.
Well, it was a huge strike. I mean, it took 4 years.
Right.
It took 4 years to get to that point. But what we just had intel that if we were able to get all these pieces together, there might be something there. But they didn't make a commitment before it went out on auction. They did at the end of the day.
You think you're going to face the same challenges with Welcome to Death Row?
Yeah, it's going to be brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you're talking about a story that involves music and, you have people with agendas and, that want to do it their way and might not want to do it the way I want to do it. It'll be a struggle.
And these are some of the compromises that were made in the end result, which was straight out of Compton, I'm assuming. Some of the things that you were dissatisfied with as a result of others'
I wouldn't say dissatisfied with. I mean, I'm a big boy, so I expect that it's okay. It's going to be Dre and Cube's show. I spoke to Heller. They don't like Heller. Put 2 and 2 together. It's not, and I didn't take offense to it because this happens all the time. Even if that wasn't the issue, producers pick the people that they want to work with and the writers they want to work with after, so you don't sweat that.
Have you thought onto your next project after this, or are you solely concentrated?
Oh, I've got a, I'm.
Can I suggest the Wu-Tang
I've written a
story?
remake of Dolomite. So
really?
I have that, and I've written a immigration comedy with Donald Trump jokes.
Wow.
So
that's easy. That sounds easy to write. Yeah.
I have a few things. That
I think Wu-Tang would be a super interesting story to see develop. Right?
Yeah.
Beastie Boys or something like that. I mean, if you want to continue down that path, but you might.
Yeah, the thing is, it's the story. It's really the story and the human relationships.
Yeah.
It's got to be, apart from just the notoriety of the group itself, there has to be something there that is just, wow.
There's got to be something epic.
Wow.
Well, I mean, think about the origins of just the Wu-Tang and what they've been able to accomplish on that side of the continent. I mean, that right there in itself is very interesting to me. Again, but I'm looking at it from, I'm in love with the content already. We're pitching you stuff, and we have producer credits. That's why.
I'll tell you, I'm not. I'm
the Wake the Flock Up story would be fantastic. By the way, here's this chubby kid, and he's able to.
No, it's
think about
it. My real interest in hip hop related stuff was Ruthless and Death Row. Those stories were really interesting to me. As a writer, I like to deal with different kinds of subjects, so I don't want to necessarily just stay in the hip hop area. But I like the idea of Dolomite as a black superhero. So I'm working on that, developing that. And just taking that iconic 70s character and putting him in 2016 with apps and iPhones trying to and have him be a better hustler than anybody, even though he's old school. The dress wear.
Oh, you just costume wise, you just want to see it happen. That's
pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, he's gonna have a lot of the attitude. I mean, if you look at
be like Shaft.
You look at Dolomite. Dolomite has this sort of moral core to him. He's anti-drug. He's certainly pro-sex.
Right.
Free love.
But he's also loyal. And if you take something from him, he's going to get it. He's going to get it back. And he's not going to be beholden to the man. So he has a certain, appeal, real appeal.
Jim Kelly. That's all right? No?
He's Terry Crews.
I'm excited about your reimagining of a blaxploitation film into something more modern and more serving to the community that we have now. I think that would be a good idea. But going back to the Death Row, I was just wondering what what kind of findings you're excited to divulge with the movie. What new information you've discovered that you are super stoked to share with the world through this film.
I appreciate the question. I do.
Yeah.
But it's the story either works or it doesn't, and it's there's enough there, and I'll go outside the book, but there won't be any sort of radical for somebody that's really super close to the story. I think it's going to be new to most people. It's going to be new and fresh and interesting to most people because they don't really know what happened.
So you think we have misconceptions of how things actually went down?
No, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what went down.
As the public, I mean, I'm referencing the public.
No, I don't think the public is really onto this story yet.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Uh-huh.
I think some people are from years ago. People like yourself, followed it. But, there's this whole audience of kids 13 to, up to 21 that they just straight Outta Compton just woke them up.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're hungry for this period in history. It's like I remember when, I got out of high school and, I'm thinking about shit from the 60s and how curious I was suddenly about Jim Morrison and Pink Floyd and The Who and all that. And, this is what's happening now. Suge Knight. Oh my God. And you're right. Most people know Dre because of Beats. I mean, he hadn't produced an album in 10 years or something
at least.
Before this most recent one. He was mainly a mentor and a guy that pulled in Eminem and I guess had 50 Cent and others.
So we are coming to the end of the show. I want to thank you for coming out and really talking to us. I think the stories that are developing and explaining them through the eyes, I think of someone who's solely looking at it as a human interest story, I think is what you're doing. And really want to expose, I understand we wanting the facts and you got to tell us, but the storytelling behind it and the way you're putting it together, it's becoming this artistic thing now. Instead of just simple documentary style, which very much of the time it's done artistically, but the way you're putting it together, it's interesting for me and it's interesting for my 14-year-old cousin or brother. And I got to commend you for doing that for such an important topic to many people in my generation and everyone in this room. So I want to thank you for that. I think there's a lot of stuff that needs to be said. And if someone's going to approach it in a noblest way with that, a real goal in mind and just kind of let the story develop. I think that's always important to pay attention to those people that do that. I wish you the best. Thank you for, I cannot
George.
wait to see it develop. And when can we expect it? Do you have any idea at all?
Oh no, I'm raising development money right now, to attach talent and, do the various iterations of the script. And I have a 21-page, very detailed, single-spaced treatment that shows you how the movie unfolds, at least at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And
can I see it?
I have a pretty good idea.
Do you have it with
Not
you?
yet, Guy.
No?
Sorry. That'll go viral.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying. I wanted an exclusive, that's all. Thank you again for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
I was really excited to have you, and I think we succeeded. You answered everything. You answered a lot of questions that I was going to ask you before I asked them. I don't know. You're looking at me kind of weird. Did you have something you want to bring up? Okay. I'm going to ask you. I just thought it wasn't appropriate to the content of the story. And you might not even have uncovered that. But Someone asked me to ask you, he right there want me to ask you, do you think Eazy-E contracted the AIDS to play people contracted AIDS, or was it slip of hand and forced upon him?
Let me say this.
Shit.
Ooh, that's sensitive.
Get your phones out.
No.
Do you think he was shot up with AIDS, or do you think he...
I don't think there's a conspiracy.
You don't?
No, I don't.
Clean answer.
Not really.
No.
No. Okay. There you go. Is that good, Dips? You good? You're happy? All right. Leigh Savidge, everybody.